Hello YouTube, and welcome to another DBTGamer special. I've been thinking about Resident Evil a lot lately, and I wanted to create this video to talk about my thoughts and feelings and where things might be going, or where I would like the game series to go. So, I'm showing off some footage in this video. I've got some footage from Resident Evil, the remake, Resident Evil 3 remake, and Resident Evil 4 remake. And I've chosen these games for a lot of reasons. It's these are some of my favourites, and one of them I absolutely loved. But we'll get into that in a little while. Anyway, the first topic in this video I want to talk about is the classic Resident Evil games. Recently I heard that Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3, the PC versions of the classic games with the tank controls and all that stuff, is being worked on by Good Old Games, and it's coming to PC. That's great. You know, they're fixing some bugs and they're improving like little bits here and there, but they're trying to keep the games as close to the original as possible. And I think it's great that these classic versions of the Resident Evil games, they're coming back and they're going to be on PC. There is a but though. I'm hoping that these ports also come to consoles in the future, because I really like the old school Resident Evil games, and I think it would be a shame to let those old versions just rot on like a hard drive at Capcom. They're an important part of Resident Evil's history and also Capcom's history, and I think that everybody, whether they're on PC or on console, should be able to enjoy them. Recently, the Tomb Raider trilogy got a lot of praise for doing pretty much the same thing that Resident Evil did. And Capcom, just do what Tomb Raider did. You know, just release the Resident Evil original trilogy that was on, with the tank controls and everything like that, onto consoles. It's something I would really like to see, because those games are getting harder and harder to find, and also they're getting harder and harder to play because, well, just scarcity of copies. So yeah, that's my first request of Capcom. My second request is tied to the Resident Evil remakes and my feelings on how they've been going lately. I suppose I'll go through the games one by one. Resident Evil 1 remake. It's great. It's practically perfect. There's very little else I would change or add to that. Resident Evil 2 remake. It's good, and it does a lot of things right. The only things it kind of fails in, there's the second scenario for the characters is not very different to the first scenario. It's a little bit more difficult. Mr. X pops up more often. And also there's an extra boss fight towards the end. But other than that, it's pretty much the same game. But I still enjoyed it, and I still thought it was good. Not great, just good, you know. Like a solid 7.5 out of 10. Yeah, it does so much right, and 7.5 is a very high score. You know, people think 7's a bad score these days, but it's not. It's very good. It's way above average. Now, let's get on to the elephant in the room. This is one of the reasons why I made this video in the first place. I haven't been feeling very well lately, so I've been playing a lot of games to keep myself occupied whilst I get better. And I picked up Resident Evil 3 Remake, and I played it over like 5 days. And originally I wasn't going to play it because I didn't want to support it. But I found a workaround. I bought it secondhand as cheaply as possible, and you know, I played through it. And how did I feel about it? Well, to be honest, this is probably no news to anybody. This is probably the worst Resident Evil remake I've ever played. It is so cut down in terms of content from the original. Let me just count the ways. Clock Tower, gone. Park, gone. The Raccoon City, it's tiny compared to the original. Another thing that I didn't like that was cut from the Resident Evil 3 remake is the boss fight with the giant worm. This was quite an important boss fight in the original game, and also in some ways quite difficult because it could do like an instant death sort of maneuver. And in the first boss fight with this worm, it was just quite difficult because you're in a really enclosed space and you could die quite easily. And also the second fight was also a lot of fun, and I just think it's a big shame that we lost this fight in the first place. I mean, that's what really hurt me the most. Just areas being gone. And
come on, don't look at me like
there were things that I liked about it. The boss fights with Nemesis, you know, they were probably my favourite bits. Nemesis himself, apart from when he was in the boss fights, he wasn't really that much of a nuisance to deal with. If you just toss a grenade at him, he'll take the hit, fall down, and sometimes, this is the key word here, sometimes you'll get like an item from him, like a gun upgrade or some ammo or, you know, something like that. And that's really all you get from him. And I remember the original Resident Evil 3 quite vividly, and that game had a lot of opportunity for replay. Example, the puzzles, the answer would change. There was like 4 different answers for each puzzle. So every time you played the game through, the game would go, right, this person is on his like 4th playthrough. I know, I'll give the player a different answer for puzzle A, and puzzle B, I'll keep the same answer. But the point is, it used to just change the answers to the puzzle. And this helped the gameplay stay fresh on multiple playthroughs. And to a certain extent, the Resident Evil 3 remake has sort of done this. But it only changes, like, enemies. So there's, like, harder enemies. Or some of the key items which will unlock certain areas are sort of shuffled around. But you can only access this mode if you're playing in, like, Inferno difficulty. Or really difficult versions of the game. I like challenge. Really, I do. But I think locking this, you know, rearrange the key items behind a hard difficulty level is kind of a mistake. So, yeah, Resident Evil 3 remake. Overall, I didn't really like it that much. If I was to give it like a score, and most of this score is based on a lot of the stuff that was cut out of the game, like a 4 out of 10. I liked how Carlos got a little bit more to do in the game. You know, he gets to explore the police station, but in the original game, Jill also got to explore the police station, and it kind of giving Carlos that area took away from Jill's story. I was looking at Carlos and I was thinking, what if Jill was here, you know, and she saw Brad, you know, being a zombie, you know, and having to shoot him and take him down. She'd probably be in tears. It'd be quite an emotional moment for her. And, you know, walking down the STARS office and, you know, seeing that no one's there, and she now has to escape Raccoon City on her own whilst being pursued by the Nemesis, you know. So I was glad that Carlos got another bit of gameplay, but I was not glad that it took away from Jill. And yeah, I mean, how would I make a better Resident Evil 3 remake? Personally, I would have given the developers more time. I know this Resident Evil 3 remake was created in 2020, which was when game development was hard for a lot of game developers, but I think if Capcom had just given the team more time, maybe 6 more months, hell, give them a whole year, you know, release that game in 2021, and they could have addressed some of these issues, like, you know, cut areas that have been shrunken down and that sort of thing. I like the idea of the shop where you can use your points to buy weapons and upgrades for your characters and costumes and, you know, all that fun stuff. I like that. I know there was like a multiplayer mode called Resistance where you could, one person was a evil villain who was putting zombies into the map and trying to kill everybody, and the other person was, whilst the other player was trying to kill all the monsters and escape. Maybe this mode took up, like, development time. I didn't play Resistance. I wanted to play the main story, and you know, that's what I was there for. And I just think the game needed more time, and then it could have been at least as good as Resident Evil 2 remake. I mean, another thing that I would have liked is give Carlos his own campaign. You know, have a Jill campaign and a Carlos campaign. I don't quite know how you'd accomplish this, but that's maybe what they were trying to do by giving Carlos, you know, the PlayStation portion. But yeah, ultimately, after finishing Resident Evil 3 Remake, I just felt like I want more, but I'm not gonna get more. You know, it's like going to a restaurant for a limited time only. You can eat this amazing burger, and then you come back a few weeks later and you're like, can I have that amazing burger again, please? No, you can't. That burger's gone. And that's how that remake made me feel. Just, I want more, because there was stuff I liked, just not enough. Next remake, Resident Evil 4 remake. This was fantastic and practically perfect. You know, it's next to the Resident Evil 1 remake. It's my favourite remake. Leon's campaign, it's great. And when they announced that they were doing separate ways for Ada, it pretty much made the game perfect. Everything that was sort of left out of Leon's game was given to Ada, and you know, it worked very well, and it was good. That Ada campaign, and I really enjoyed Resident Evil 4 Remake. I got a lot of the trophies. I beat the game on every difficulty with both Ada and Leon, and I just really enjoyed it. It's great. I've heard that we're getting some more Resident Evil remakes through like rumours, so take this part of the video with a pinch of salt. I've heard that Code Veronica is getting a remake. I'm looking forward to that because I love Code Veronica. It's a really good game, but I do think it needs remake treatment, and there's a lot of opportunity and promise there. I'm just hoping that Capcom doesn't screw it up and doesn't make another dud like Resident Evil remake. And yeah, if I was giving Resident Evil 4 remake a score, you know, it's like a 8 or a 9, same as the Resident Evil 1 remake. You know, they're so close to perfect. You know, a 9 is a brilliant score. And yeah, other remakes I've heard of that may be happening. I've heard that Resident Evil 0 might be getting a remake. They'll probably do it, you know, behind the character, you know, over the shoulder, like similar controls to Resident Evil 2 and yeah, I suppose Resident Evil 2 remake. That would make sense to me. And yeah, I think that's probably the best way to do it. And you could probably do the exact same if you wanted to remake Resident Evil 1. I think Resident Evil 0, you could change the story a little bit. so that it fits more with the Resident Evil canon, because it, gameplay-wise, you know, it works fine. But the story, it fits awkwardly in the Resident Evil timeline. And it's not a perfect fit. You have to sort of suspend your disbelief and just accept that that's where it fits. This is how it happened. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense. So, yeah, maybe they could address that in some way. Some people have said they might do a Resident Evil 1 remake. I'm very attached to the remake we already have. But if you're gonna do it, here's a few suggestions, Capcom. Suggestion number 1. Try and create an ending which shows all of the survivors canonically getting out of the mansion incident. Because you've got Chris, Jill, Barry, and Rebecca who survived the mansion incident. If some way you could make the game so that you can save everybody. I know Resident Evil 1 has this 2-story plot where you play as Chris and you save Rebecca and you also save Jill. And meanwhile in Jill's campaign you save Barry and you save Chris. I still want both campaigns to be present because they both play very differently and they're both good in their own way. But I would also like to see a way of making both stories maybe intertwine and link up a little bit better. There's also, this is a fun little idea, Bravo Team. Bravo Team is the team that went in before the Alpha Team. And in a game called Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, this had like little levels where you could play as Bravo Team. And you could sort of see what happened to Bravo Team. Like you could see Richard fight the snake, and player 2 would play as Rebecca, because Richard and Rebecca, they were sort of working together. And there was Forrest who got attacked by birds, and there was also Kenneth who got attacked by zombies. I don't know how Capcom would accomplish this, but it would be really cool to play like a story mode where you can kind of play out what happened to Bravo Team. You know, have like some little mini chapters which just explains what happened to them, and you get to play it and you get to experience it for yourself. Another idea that I came up with was towards the end of the game. Obviously, huge spoiler here for like a 20-year-old game. Albert Wesker, you know, he betrays the team and he dies. Tyrant stabs him through the chest, and you know, you think, okay, that's the end of Wesker. You know, he's dead. But that was his plan all along. He wanted to get infected by the T-virus and become a super human. And what I would like to see this is another kind of crazy idea that I thought of. What if we could play as Wesker? You know, what if we could play like the escape sequence of how he gets out of the laboratory? Maybe some sections throughout the game where you can meet certain characters and gun down some enemies, you know, pretend to help them, but obviously not help them too much because you're still trying to be the villain. You know, you gotta meet up with Jill, or you gotta meet up with Barry and make sure Barry's still keeping up his end of the bargain and doing his job. So yeah, I want some sort of Wesker storyline. That I feel that would be cool. You know, a Bravo storyline and a Wesker storyline. You know, these don't have to be a full game. These could be DLC. Let's see. Trying to think of other stuff that I would want. Okay. Yeah, here's a new one. In Resident Evil Dark Side Chronicles, there was a chapter called Operation Javier, where you got to play as Krauser and Leon. And I don't really know if this will ever happen, but I just think it'd be cool if we could play Operation Javier, but in the Resident Evil 4 remake style of the engine.
It smells like... Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
Because Krauser, he's a cool character, and not many people who are new to the Resident Evil series know how, you know, he became evil. You know, what forced him to turn to the dark side and become the man he was in Resident Evil 4. If there was a way to play Operation Javier, I think you could, you know, weave the story in, and, you know, I think it'll be just great for people to play through. The Dark Side Chronicle game, it works fine, but I always wanted to play it in a normal sort of Resident Evil fashion that wasn't a light gun game. And there is also another chapter which exists in Umbrella Chronicles. It's called like there's a boss in it called Talos. It's like a giant tyrant with a big muscular arm that can destroy and attack people and deal heavy damage, but his other arm is like a huge rocket launcher. And obviously this is a pretty dangerous boss battle. And this entire chapter, it's in like I think it's based in Antarctica or somewhere else that's really cold. Correct me if I'm wrong here in the comments. But I really enjoyed this little chapter in Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, and I always thought, could we get like a piece of DLC or perhaps make it into a full game where you get to play this mission where you're like taking down the Talos project in Antarctica. And yeah, just thought it'd be a really cool idea. Another thing I wanted to talk about was we're probably going to get Resident Evil 5 remake eventually. The game is quite good the way it is. You know, I still quite enjoy it. But I think they should lean into the horror more and sort of do what they did with Resident Evil 4 Remake. Obviously include the chapters from the DLC, definitely. Because that's really important to the story. The one where you get to play as Jill Valentine.
Gross.
And also the one where you get to play as Jill and Chris and you're chasing after Wesker. And you're in that place that looks like the Spencer Mansion, but it's not quite the Spencer Mansion. But it feels very similar. And but obviously make it the Resident Evil 5 remake a bit more darker, a bit more scary, and maybe have some more bosses, because there are certain characters that have never really appeared in Resident Evil again, and I've seen like end credit scenes of Resident Evil games. Example, Resident Evil 4 Remake, it shows Krauser on like an operating table. What if you know, Wesker somehow experimented on Krauser and had him as like a bodyguard or a you know, something to help him in Resident Evil 5. Jill works fine as a bodyguard because as a motivator for Chris, you know, to obviously he wants to save her, but Krauser could also be a good choice as well as Jill. Another one would be Steve. In Resident Evil Code Veronica, Steve, Krauser, not Krauser, Wesker says that my men have already taken him. So, what if, you know, Wesker did some, like, messed up experiments and turned Steve back into his monster form from Code Veronica, and as Chris Redfield in Resident Evil 5, you had to fight, you know, Monster Steve and, you know, put him down, and obviously you could have Chris, you know, flashing back to Code Veronica and, you know, sorry Steve, I gotta do this, and, you know, just end his suffering because obviously Wesker's turned him into nothing more than a puppet. So, yeah, that's another cool idea I had for Resident Evil 5. You know, give Wesker some more bodyguards and use, like, reanimated characters that he's just been playing around with. I like the whole idea of Jill being a puppet, but use other characters that would make sense in the Resident Evil lore. And that's pretty much all I would do with Resident Evil 5. Although there is one more thing. But this one's not really as necessary. Somehow change the shop and include the merchant or a merchant from you know, because I always found the shop in Resident Evil 5 kind of boring, and having a merchant, you know, just talk to you whilst you buy your guns, I think would just make it a little bit more better. And that's really all the things I want to talk about with remakes. Now, as for the Resident Evil series going forward, stuff I would like to see. I'm glad we got Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8. I didn't really care for them that much. I think my favourite of the two would be 7 because it had a big spooky mansion and it sort of, you know, revitalised Resident Evil and, you know, brought it back into the limelight and made it popular again. But not the biggest fan of Ethan Winters. I've always liked the more old school, classical sort of characters rather than Ethan himself. I mean, the idea of Ethan was he was supposed to be a character who would be like a regular human because some of the STARS members, they're basically superheroes at this point. Good idea, but by Resident Evil 8, he's practically the same as some of the other STARS members. So,
Come on.
yeah. Resident Evil 9, I don't really know what to say. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. As for other stuff I would like to see, there's been a lot of cancellations and abandoned projects in the in like Resident Evil leaks from Capcom when people have hacked the servers and stuff like that. Resident Evil Outrage, or maybe at one point it was going to be called Resident Evil Revelations 3. I looked this game up countless times on the internet. You know, I scoured Google or YouTube for like screenshots or any sort of news on Resident Evil Revelations 3 or Resident Evil Outrage, because I actually really wanted to play
All that leaves is the main power
this
switch.
game, because it was going to star one of my favourite characters, Rebecca Chambers, and
Enjoy.
she was going to come back and have her own little adventure, and I just thought it was a great idea to use a character who only had really, I suppose, 1.5 games, because Rebecca, you play as her in Resident Evil 1, and you play as her in Resident Evil 0, and she comes back in Mercenaries mode a few times, but that's it as far as her story is concerned. She's mostly a medic, and she mostly makes antidotes for zombie viruses and stuff like that. But I always wanted a
Carlos,
game
it's Jill. I've restored power to the
where
subway.
you could play as again and, you know, just...
Next up is the traffic control system. It should
Here's
be in
another
the subway
story.
company's offices.
Right.
And-
I think I know the building.
That's what I want for the
Way to go, partner.
Resident Evil series.
Step ahead.
Not your partner.
Characters that haven't had many games, you know. Example, Billy Cohen. He's only ever had one game. Give Billy Cohen another game. There's, at the end of the game, Resident Evil 0, it talks about how, you know, Rebecca sets him free and he just leaves. We never get to know what happened to him. We never get to know if he died, if he got a new life, if he had to fight more monsters. Characters who haven't had their story finished or have been left sort of in limbo or ambivalence, give them another game. And I have one last request. This one is probably the least likely out of all these. It's pie in the sky sort of wish upon a star sort of idea, but that's what this video is all about. You know, it's my streams and opinions and, you know, stuff like that on Resident Evil games. Haunting Ground. Haunting Ground was a survival horror game where you play as a girl called Fiona, and you've got this dog who you can use to attack things. And it was a pretty scary horror game, and it had some pretty scary themes. And it was really dark, and it was all about the horrors of, I suppose, pregnancy and alchemy and cloning, because the story of the game basically is there's a character who wants to live forever, but the only way he can live forever is if he keeps finding people, and then he can be reborn by them having a baby. Yes. And it's one of those horror games which I really liked it. And having the dog Huey with you to attack monsters, I also thought was a really good idea, because you are encouraged to build up this bond with this character, Huey, and if you don't build up this bond enough, the game ends early and you have to try again. So it's a symbiosis relationship, and I enjoyed playing it. I managed to get the best ending, and I thought it was really good. And I think Haunting Ground would benefit from a modern day remake. Maybe you'd have to tone down or change the story, and maybe tone down some of the costumes and outfits that Fiona wears. But I think if it was handled in the right way, it would be a great game and a really good idea. Capcom has recently got too comfortable, I feel. You know, they're making new Resident Evil games, they're making Resident Evil remakes, and I suppose they're making Monster Hunter, and that's pretty much all they're working on. Oh yeah, there's also the Mega Man collections, but that's really it. They're not really taking risks. And I think Haunting Ground would be an interesting risk for them to take. It might not sell as much as a Resident Evil game, but I think it would be a good idea to remake it, and, you know, it might sell really well, you know, if done right. Same with Dino Crisis. Capcom, your fans want Dino Crisis. Bring it back, you know. We remake the first game, you know, add more dinosaur types. Have maybe a dinosaur stalking you in certain chapters of the game. And I played Dino Crisis. I loved it. It was a good game. Just a remake would be such a good idea, and I would definitely buy it. I'd definitely buy a Haunting Ground remake. And that's all I want to say on this topic. So yeah, it's been nice just to vent and get some ideas out when it comes to Capcom and their survival horror series. Anyway, please like, comment and subscribe. Tell me what you think of my ideas, and tell me some of your ideas in the comments down below. And yeah, thank you for watching.